The gunshot echoed through the thin walls of the boarding house, and Theresa Vaughn found herself flat on the rough wooden floor before she even realized her legs had given out beneath her. Outside in the dusty streets of Fort Collins, Colorado, chaos erupted as men shouted and horses whinnied in panic, but all she could think about was that her father was never coming back through that door again. It was April 1878, and spring had come late to the high plains, leaving patches of snow still clinging to the shadows of buildings and the distant mountains gleaming white against a merciless blue sky. Theresa pressed her palms against the splintered floorboards, trying to push herself up, but her arms trembled and refused to hold her weight. She was 19 years old, and in the span of a single morning, she had become an orphan. Her mother had died of fever 3 years ago, and now her father, caught in the crossfire of a saloon brawl he had not even been part of, lay dead in the street just 20 feet from where she collapsed. Someone pounded on her door. She heard voices, concerned and urgent, but they seemed to come from very far away. Her chest felt tight, as if iron bands were squeezing the air from her lungs. She managed to sit up, pulling her knees to her chest, and that was when the tears finally came. They streamed down her face in hot trails, dripping onto her worn cotton dress, the same dress she had mended just last week while her father read the newspaper aloud to her in his deep, comforting voice. The door burst open, and Mrs. Fletcher from the room next door rushed in, her gray hair escaping from its pins. She dropped to her knees beside Theresa and wrapped her arms around the younger woman, murmuring words that were meant to be soothing, but only made the reality sharper and more painful. "Your father, sweet girl, I am so sorry," Mrs. Fletcher said, and Theresa felt the older woman's tears dampening her hair. It was so fast, he did not suffer. But Theresa would suffer. That much was clear already. Her father had been a freight wagon driver, making runs between Fort Collins and Denver, and while he had always managed to keep them fed and housed, there had been little money left over. Theresa knew how to read and write and do figures, and she could cook and clean and sew, but none of those skills would pay for the boarding house room or put food on the table now that his income was gone. The sheriff came by that afternoon, a tired man with a drooping mustache who took off his hat and twisted it in his hands while he explained what had happened. 2 ranch hands had gotten into an argument over a card game, and when one had drawn his gun, the other had done the same. Her father had been walking past the saloon on his way to the livery stable to check on his wagon team. A stray bullet had struck him in the chest, and he had died almost instantly. The sheriff assured her that both men were now in custody and would face justice, but justice would not bring her father back or pay her debts. After the sheriff left, Theresa sat on the edge of her narrow bed and stared at the wall. She had no other family. Her mother had been an only child, and her father's brother had moved to California during the gold rush and had not been heard from in over a decade. She supposed she could try to find work as a domestic servant or perhaps in one of the hotels, but Fort Collins was still a relatively small town, and positions were scarce. Most families who could afford help already had it. She spent the next 3 days in a fog of grief and fear. Mrs. Fletcher helped her arrange for her father's burial in the small cemetery on the edge of town. The funeral was simple, attended by a handful of people who had known him, and when it was over, Theresa stood by the fresh grave and whispered words she was not sure even she believed about seeing him again someday in a better place. That evening, the landlord of the boarding house, Mr. Grissom, knocked on her door. He was a portly man who always smelled of tobacco and grease, and he did not waste time on pleasantries. "Miss Vaughn, I am sorry for your loss, but I need to know how you intend to pay for next week's rent," he said, his small eyes cold and calculating. "Your father paid through Sunday, but after that, I need the room for paying tenants." Theresa straightened her spine and met his gaze. "I understand, Mr. Grissom. I am looking for work. I will have the money." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She had asked at the hotel, at the general store, at the restaurant, and everywhere else she could think of. No one was hiring. Some had been kind in their refusals, others curt, but the answer had been the same everywhere. After Mr. Grissom left, Theresa sat down and counted the money she had. Her father's wallet had contained $3.20. She had another $1.15 that she had saved from doing mending work. $4.35. The room cost $6 a week. Even if she ate nothing, she could not afford to stay. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. Somewhere down the street, a piano played a melancholy tune. A dog barked. A couple argued in low, tense voices. Theresa felt as if she were drowning, sinking beneath dark water with no one to pull her up. The next morning, she packed her few belongings into a carpet bag her mother had brought from Ohio years ago. She put on her best dress, a faded blue cotton with white buttons, and her only coat, which was too thin for the Colorado cold but would have to do. She had no plan beyond leaving the boarding house before Mr. Grissom could throw her out. Perhaps she could find work in Denver or Cheyenne, or somewhere else along the railroad line. She was walking down the stairs with her bag when Mrs. Fletcher appeared from her room. The older woman took one look at Theresa and shook her head. "Where do you think you are going?" she asked. "I have to leave," Theresa said quietly. "I cannot pay the rent." "You have anywhere to go," Theresa shook her head. Mrs. Fletcher sighed heavily. "Listen to me, child. I may be old and poor, but I still have eyes and ears. There is a ranch about 10 miles north of town, the Ortega place. They lost their housekeeper last month when she went back east to care for her sick mother. I heard the owner's wife mentioning they need someone. It is hard work, but they are decent people, and they will give you room and board plus wages." Hope fluttered in Theresa's chest for the first time in days. "Do you truly think they would hire me?" "I think it is worth asking. The worst they can say is no, which puts you no worse off than you are now. Mrs. Fletcher gave her directions and even insisted on packing her a lunch of bread and cheese for the walk. Theresa hugged the older woman tightly, thanking her through fresh tears, and then set out into the bright morning. The road north out of Fort Collins was rutted and dusty, bordered on both sides by open grassland that stretched to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The sky was enormous and blindingly blue, dotted with a few wispy clouds. Theresa had not walked more than a mile before her feet began to ache in her worn boots, but she kept going, driven by desperation, and the faint spark of hope Mrs. Fletcher had kindled. She had been walking for nearly 2 hours when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. She stepped to the side of the road and turned to see a rider approaching at an easy canter. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was a young man, probably in his mid-20s, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, a dark vest over a faded blue shirt, and dusty leather chaps. He rode a bay horse with a white blaze down its face, and he sat in the saddle with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. He slowed as he reached her and touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Morning, miss. You look like you are heading somewhere with purpose." His voice was deep and pleasant, with a hint of amusement. Theresa found herself looking up into a face that was tanned and weathered but undeniably handsome, with strong features and eyes the color of creek water in shadow, a shifting gray-green. A scar cut a thin white line through his left eyebrow, giving him a slightly roguish appearance. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am looking for the Ortega Ranch. I was told it is about 10 miles north of town." "You are on the right road," he said, "but you still have about 8 miles to go. That is a long walk on a day like this." He glanced up at the sun, which was climbing higher and growing hotter by the minute. "I am heading that direction myself. I can give you a ride if you like." Theresa hesitated. Her father had always warned her about accepting rides from strangers, but what choice did she have? Her feet already hurt, and the thought of walking another 8 miles in the rising heat made her want to weep. "That is very kind of you," she said carefully, "but I would not want to impose." "No imposition at all," he said easily. He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion and held out his hand. "Name is Cole Osborne. I work at the Ortega Ranch, so we are going to the same place." She shook his hand, noting the calluses on his palm and the strength of his grip. "Theresa Vaughn. I am hoping they might have worked for me." His expression turned more serious. "Housekeeper position?" "Yes, I heard they needed someone," he nodded slowly. "They do. Mrs. Ortega has been managing the house on her own since old Betty left, and it is a lot for one woman to handle with 3 children and a husband and hired men to cook for." He glanced at her bag. "You are not from around here originally, are you?" "I have been living in Fort Collins for the past 5 years," she said, a little defensively. "My father was a freight driver." Her throat tightened. "He died 4 days ago, in the shootout on Main Street." Cole's face changed, sympathy softening his features. "I heard about that. I am real sorry. That is a hard thing." "Yes," she said quietly, not trusting herself to say more. He seemed to understand. "Well, let us get you to the ranch. Mrs. Ortega is a good woman. If she has work, she will give you a fair shake." He swung back up into the saddle and then reached down. "Give me your bag first, then your hand." She handed him the carpet bag, which he secured behind his saddle, and then she placed her hand in his. He pulled her up with surprising ease, settling her behind him on the horse. "Hold on," he said over his shoulder. "Horse is gentle, but the road can be rough." Theresa wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling awkward and hyper-aware of the solid warmth of him, the faint smell of leather and horses and clean sweat. She had never been this close to a man who was not her father, and it made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Cole urged the horse into a smooth trot, and they traveled in silence for a while. The landscape rolled past, grass and sagebrush, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking the path of a creek. Mountains rose in the distance, still snow-capped and magnificent. After a few miles, Cole spoke again. "So what kind of work did you do in Fort Collins?" "I helped my father with his accounts and did mending work for people in the boarding house where we lived," she said. "I can cook and clean and manage a household. My mother taught me before she passed." "Sounds like you will do just fine then," he said. "The Ortegas are good people. Mr. Ortega runs cattle and horses. He is fair with his workers and pays on time. Mrs. Ortega runs the house and keeps us all fed and in line." "Do you enjoy working there?" "I do. I have been there about 3 years now, ever since I came up from Texas. Before that, I worked on ranches all over. This is the first place that felt like it might be worth staying at for a while." "Why did you leave Texas?" There was a pause, and she felt him tense slightly. "Family troubles." "Nothing worth talking about." She did not press. Everyone had their secrets, their sorrows. She had enough of her own. They rode on, and gradually Theresa began to relax against him, the rhythm of the horse's gait almost soothing. She felt exhausted from days of grief and worry, and the warmth of the sun and the steady movement lulled her into a kind of waking dream. "Almost there," Cole said eventually, and she looked up to see buildings ahead. The ranch was larger than she had expected, with a 2-story house painted white, a big red barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the pastures, and she could see horses in one of the corrals. Cole rode up to the house and dismounted, then helped her down. Her legs felt shaky after the ride, and she had to steady herself against the horse for a moment. "You wait here," Cole said. "I will go see if Mrs. Ortega is around." He went up the porch steps and knocked on the door. A few moments later, it opened to reveal a woman in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun and a kind, intelligent face. She wore a practical calico dress and an apron, and she looked from Cole to Theresa with curious eyes. Cole spoke to her in low tones, and Theresa saw the woman's expression shift from curiosity to interest. She nodded and said something back, and then Cole waved Theresa over. "Mrs. Ortega, this is Miss Theresa Vaughn," he said. "Theresa, this is Mrs. Elena Ortega. Please come in, Mrs." Ortega said warmly, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of Spanish heritage. "Cole says you are looking for the housekeeper position." "Yes, madam," Theresa said, climbing the steps. "I can cook and clean and I am a hard worker. I need the position badly. My father just passed away and I have nowhere else to go." Mrs. Ortega's eyes softened with sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss. Come inside and sit down. We will talk." Cole touched his hat brim to both women and headed back toward the barn, leading his horse. Theresa followed Mrs. Ortega into a spacious kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The room was warm and welcoming, with copper pots hanging on the walls and a big cast iron stove dominating one corner. "Sit, please," Mrs. Ortega said, gesturing to a chair at the long wooden table. She poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of Theresa before sitting down herself. "Tell me about yourself." Theresa took a breath and began. She explained about her parents, her father's work, her mother's death, and then her father's sudden passing. She talked about her skills and her willingness to work hard. She tried to keep her voice steady, but toward the end it wavered, and she had to blink back tears. "I will not lie to you, Mrs. Ortega. I am desperate. I have no family and no money and nowhere to go. But I promise I will work harder than anyone you have ever hired. I will not let you down." Mrs. Ortega reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I believe you, and I need help. Running this house and cooking for my family and the hired men is more than I can manage alone, especially with the children needing attention. The position is yours if you want it. Room and board, plus $12 a month. You will have Sundays off unless there is an emergency." "Does that sound fair?" Relief washed over Theresa so powerfully she thought she might faint. "More than fair. Thank you, Mrs. Ortega. Thank you so much. Call me Elena, please. We do not stand on formality here. Now let me show you your room and then you can rest a bit before supper. Tomorrow we will start going over your duties." Elena led her upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the pastures toward the mountains. It was simple, but it was hers, and it was safe. Theresa set down her carpet bag and turned to Elena with tears in her eyes. "I cannot thank you enough," she said. "You do not need to thank me. You are going to earn your keep, believe me," Elena said with a warm smile. "Now rest. Supper is at 6. You will meet the rest of the family then." After Elena left, Theresa sat on the bed and let herself cry, but this time the tears were not just for grief but also for relief. She had a place to live and work to do. She was not going to starve or end up on the streets. It was not much, but it was enough. She lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes, but exhaustion claimed her and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the sun was lower in the sky, casting golden light through her window. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, and then remembered where she was. She quickly washed her face in the basin on the dresser, tidied her hair, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was bustling now. Alina was at the stove, stirring something that smelled delicious. 3 children were setting the table, chattering and laughing. A tall man with graying hair and a weathered face stood near the back door, washing his hands in a basin. He looked up as Theresa entered and smiled. "You must be Miss Vaughn," he said. "I am Rafael Ortega. Welcome to our home." "Thank you, Mr. Ortega," she said. "Just Rafael, please." He dried his hands and gestured to the children. "These are our children. Miguel is 10, Sofia is 8, and little Anna is 5. The children looked at her with open curiosity. Miguel was serious-faced and quiet, Sofia had her mother's warm eyes, and Anna had dark curls and a mischievous grin. "Hello," Theresa said, smiling at them. "I am very pleased to meet you all. Are you going to live here now?" Anna asked. "Yes, I am going to help your mother with the house." "Good," Sofia said. "Mama is always tired." Alina laughed. Out of the mouths of children. "All right, everyone, sit down. Theresa, you sit there next to Miguel. The men will be in shortly." As if on cue, the back door opened and 3 men filed in, removing their hats. Theresa recognized Cole immediately. He met her eyes and gave her a small smile before taking a seat at the far end of the table. The other 2 men were older, one probably in his 40s with a thick mustache, the other younger, maybe 30, with red hair and freckles. "Theresa, this is Jack and Danny," Raphael said, indicating the men. "They work the ranch with Cole. Gentlemen, this is Miss Theresa Vaughn, our new housekeeper." They nodded to her politely, and then Alina began setting food on the table. There was roast beef, potatoes, gravy, fresh bread, and green beans. It was more food than Theresa had seen in one place in a long time, and her stomach growled audibly. She blushed, but no one seemed to notice or care. Raphael said a brief grace, and then everyone dug in. The conversation flowed easily, mostly talk of ranch work and the coming roundup. Theresa ate quietly, observing the family. They were warm and genuine with each other, teasing and laughing. It was the kind of family dinner she remembered from when her mother was still alive, and it made her heart ache with longing and loss. She caught Cole watching her once or twice, his expression thoughtful, but he did not speak to her directly. After the meal, Alina shooed the men out and the children helped clear the table. Theresa stood to help with the dishes, but Alina stopped her. "Not tonight. You have had a long day. Go rest and we will start fresh in the morning." Theresa wanted to protest, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. She thanked Alina and went back upstairs. She changed into her nightgown and slipped under the covers. Through the open window, she could hear the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Horses nickering, a barn door closing, someone laughing. It was peaceful and strange and new, and she was not sure how she felt about any of it. She thought about Cole Osborne, the way he had helped her without hesitation, the solid warmth of him when she had ridden behind him. She barely knew him, but there had been something in the way he looked at her, a gentleness and understanding that made her feel less alone. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her again. The next morning, Theresa woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Alina already in the kitchen, building up the fire in the stove. "Good morning," Alina said, looking pleased. "You are an early riser. Good. We have a lot to do." For the next several hours, Alina showed Theresa the routines of the household. They made breakfast for the family and the hired men, which meant frying eggs and bacon, making biscuits and brewing strong coffee. After breakfast, they cleaned up the kitchen, and then Alina took Theresa through the rest of the house, explaining what needed to be done each day. It was hard work, but Theresa threw herself into it with determination. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, beat rugs, and helped Alina prepare lunch. By midday, her back ached and her hands were red and raw, but she did not complain. "You are a good worker," Alina said approvingly as they sat down for a brief rest with cups of tea. "I think you will do very well here." "I hope so," Theresa said. "I am grateful for the chance." Over the next few days, Theresa settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke early, helped prepare meals, cleaned, did laundry, mended clothes, and helped with the children when needed. It was exhausting, but it was also satisfying in a way that surprised her. She liked the feeling of being useful, of having a place and a purpose. The Ortegas treated her kindly, more like a member of the family than a servant, and she found herself growing fond of them. The children were sweet and well-behaved most of the time, and Raphael was a quiet, steady presence who clearly adored his wife and family. The hired men were polite and respectful. Jack, the older one, was a widower who had worked for the Ortegas for years. Danny was cheerful and talkative, always ready with a joke or a story. And then there was Cole. Cole was harder to figure out. He was polite but reserved, speaking only when necessary. He worked harder than anyone else, always the first up in the morning and the last to finish at night. Theresa noticed that Raphael relied on him heavily, asking his opinion on ranch matters and trusting him to handle difficult tasks. She found herself watching Cole more than she should have, noticing the way he moved with easy grace, the way he gentled a nervous horse, or patiently showed young Miguel how to mend a fence. There was a quiet strength about him that drew her, a sense that he had weathered hard things and come through them intact. One evening, about 2 weeks after Theresa's arrival, she was sitting on the porch shelling peas for supper when Cole came around the corner of the house, leading a limping horse. He saw her and nodded. "Evening, Miss Vaughn." "Good evening, Mr. Osborne. Is the horse hurt?" "Stepped on something sharp, probably a nail. I am going to check it out in the barn." On impulse, she set down her bowl. "May I help? I do not know much about horses, but I can hold a lantern or fetch things for you." He looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, that would be helpful." She followed him to the barn, which was dim and smelled of hay and leather and horses. Cole tied the horse to a post and picked up the injured hoof, examining it carefully. Theresa lit a lantern and held it close so he could see. "There it is," he said after a moment. "Small piece of metal. This is going to hurt him, but it has to come out." He took a pair of pliers from a nearby shelf and worked carefully, murmuring soothing words to the horse. The animal flinched but held still, as if it understood Cole was trying to help. After a few tense moments, Cole pulled out a twisted piece of wire. "Got it. Now I need to clean the wound and wrap it." He glanced at her. "There is a bottle of carbolic solution on that shelf and some clean cloth strips in the box next to it. Could you grab those?" She fetched the items, and he cleaned and wrapped the hoof with practiced efficiency. When he was done, he straightened and patted the horse's neck. "You will be fine, old boy. Just need to stay off that foot for a few days." He turned to Theresa, and in the soft glow of the lantern, she saw his face more clearly than she ever had before. The scar through his eyebrow, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets and sorrows. He was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between curiosity and caution. "Thank you for the help," he said quietly. "It was nothing," she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "You did all the work. Still, it was nice to have company." There was a moment of silence, and then Theresa found herself saying, "You are very good with horses, and with people too, I think. You were very kind to me the day we met. I never properly thanked you for that." He ducked his head as if embarrassed. "I did not do anything special. You needed help, and I was going the same direction." "It was special to me," she insisted. I was at the end of my rope that day. If you had not come along, I do not know what would have happened." He looked at her again, and this time his eyes were serious. "I am glad I was there then." The air between them felt charged somehow, full of unspoken things. Theresa's heart was beating faster, and she felt heat rising in her cheeks. She knew she should step back, return to the house, but she did not want to move. "Theresa," he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. It sounded different in his deep voice, softer somehow. "If you ever need help with anything, you can come to me. I mean that." "Thank you, Cole," she said, and using his given name felt like crossing some invisible line. "That means a great deal to me." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, and she felt something shift inside her chest, a strange fluttering sensation that was both thrilling and terrifying. They stood there for another moment, and then the spell was broken by the sound of Alina calling for Theresa from the house. She stepped back quickly, smoothing her skirts. "I should go. She is going to wonder where I went." "Of course. Thanks again for the help." She hurried out of the barn, her heart still racing. She did not understand what had just happened, but she knew something had changed. She felt drawn to Cole Osborne in a way she had never felt drawn to anyone before, and it frightened her as much as it excited her. Over the next several weeks, Theresa and Cole found themselves thrown together more often. He would come into the kitchen for coffee in the mornings when she was preparing breakfast, and they would talk quietly about small things. The weather, the horses, books they had read. She learned that he had taught himself to read and write, and that he loved poetry, which surprised her. He learned that she had once dreamed of becoming a schoolteacher, and that she missed her parents terribly. They began to seek each other out, in small, careful ways. She would take lemonade out to the men working in the corrals and linger to talk with him. He would offer to help her carry heavy buckets of water or chop extra firewood. It was all very proper and innocent, but there was an undercurrent of something more, a pull between them that grew stronger with each passing day. Alina noticed, of course. She was far too observant not to. One afternoon, she and Theresa were kneading bread dough together when Alina said, without looking up, "Cole is a good man." Theresa felt her cheeks heat. "Yes, he is. He has been alone for a long time. He does not let people close easily, but I have seen the way he looks at you." Theresa's hand stilled in the dough. "How does he look at me?" Alina smiled. "Like you are water and he has been walking in the desert for years." Theresa did not know what to say to that. She wanted to deny it, to brush it off, but the truth was that she felt the same way about Cole. She thought about him all the time, watched for him, listened for his voice. She was falling in love with him, and it terrified her. "I do not know what to do," she whispered. Alina reached over and squeezed her flour-dusted hand. "You do what your heart tells you. Life is too short and too hard out here to ignore love when it finds you." But Theresa was afraid. She had lost everyone she had ever loved. Her mother, her father. What if she let herself love Cole and something happened to him? What if she was not strong enough to bear another loss? A few days later, Cole asked if she would like to go for a ride on Sunday, her day off. He said he wanted to show her a place up in the foothills, a meadow full of wildflowers. She hesitated, and he must have seen the fear in her eyes because his expression turned gentle. "Just as friends," he said. "No pressure, I just thought you might enjoy getting away from the ranch for a bit." She agreed, and on Sunday morning she put on her best dress and met him by the barn. He had saddled 2 horses, and he helped her mount, his hands strong and steady on her waist. They rode north, up into the foothills where the air was cooler and the pines began to appear. Cole led her to a high meadow that was, as promised, full of wildflowers. Purple lupines, yellow arrowleaf balsamroot, white columbines, and red Indian paintbrush covered the ground in a riot of color. The view stretched for miles, down to the plains and out toward the distant town of Fort Collins. They dismounted and let the horses graze while they sat on a fallen log. For a while they were silent, just taking in the beauty of the place. Then Cole spoke. "I come up here sometimes when I need to think," he said. "It is peaceful." "It is beautiful," Theresa agreed. "Thank you for bringing me here." "Theresa, I need to tell you something," he said, turning to face her. His expression was serious, almost pained. "I am not good at this kind of thing, talking about feelings, but I think you should know. I care about you. More than I should, maybe, considering you work for the Ortegas and I am just a hired hand, but I cannot seem to help it. You are on my mind all the time, and when I see you, I feel like I can breathe easier, like things make more sense." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Cole, I feel the same way, but I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing you," she said, her voice breaking. "Everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me. My mother, my father. What if I let myself love you and something happens? I do not think I am strong enough to survive that again." He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "Theresa, I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that whatever comes, we will face it together. You will not be alone." She looked into his eyes, those gray-green eyes that had been the first kind thing she saw on one of the worst days of her life, and she felt something inside her crack open. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something stronger. Hope. Love. The possibility of a future. "I am not strong enough," she whispered. Cole moved closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Then lean on me until you are." And then he kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. She kissed him back, letting herself fall into the feeling, into the hope and the fear and the love all tangled up together. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying, but this time the tears were not just for grief. "I do love you, Cole Osborne," she said. "I think I have from the first day." "I love you too, Theresa Vaughn," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can trust me, that I am not going anywhere." They sat there in the meadow for a long time, holding each other, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his family in Texas, about a father who drank and a mother who had died young, about brothers he had not spoken to in years. She told him about her dreams of teaching, about the quiet life she and her parents had lived, about the grief that still sat heavy in her chest. When the sun began to sink lower, they rode back to the ranch, and everything felt different now. They were not just two people working in the same place anymore. They were together, and that changed everything. Alina noticed immediately. She took one look at Theresa's face when she came into the kitchen that evening and smiled knowingly. "I am happy for you," she said simply, and pulled Theresa into a hug. Raphael and the other men took the news in stride. Raphael shook Cole's hand and told him he was a lucky man. Jack and Danny teased Cole mercilessly, but in a good-natured way. Even the children seemed delighted, especially little Anna, who declared that Theresa and Cole should get married so there could be a party with cake. But Theresa and Cole took things slowly. He courted her properly, asking Raphael's permission first, which made her smile because Raphael was not her father or guardian, but Cole wanted to do things right. They took walks in the evenings after supper, sat on the porch and talked, went to church together on Sundays. Cole carved her a wooden box for her keepsakes, and she made him a new shirt in deep blue that matched his eyes. Summer turned into fall, and the ranch was busy with preparing for winter. The men spent long days mending fences, moving cattle to lower pastures, stocking up on hay and feed. Theresa and Alina canned vegetables and fruits, smoked meat, and made sure the house was ready for the cold months ahead. One evening in late October, as Theresa and Cole sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Cole took her hand. "Theresa, I know we have not been courting long, but I am not a young man anymore. I am 26, and I have spent too many years drifting, never putting down roots. But with you, I want to build something. A life, a home, a family. I want to marry you if you will have me." She turned to him, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, Cole. Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and she felt safe and loved and finally, like she belonged somewhere. They were married in the small church in Fort Collins on a bright Saturday in November. Alina and Raphael stood up with them, and the children acted as witnesses. Theresa wore a new dress that Alina had helped her make, cream-colored with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cole wore his best suit, and he looked so handsome that Theresa could hardly breathe. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Theresa felt tears slide down her cheeks. They were happy tears this time, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming love. After the ceremony, Alina had arranged a small celebration at the ranch. There was food and music and dancing. Raphael played the guitar, and Jack surprised everyone by producing a fiddle and joining in. They danced in the barn, which had been cleared out and decorated with lanterns and ribbons. Cole held Theresa close, and they swayed together, lost in their own world. "I love you, Mrs. Osborne," he murmured in her ear. "I love you too, Mr. Osborne," she said, smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. That night, they moved into a small cabin on the edge of the ranch property that Raphael had offered them. It was just one room with a loft, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Cole carried her over the threshold, and they spent their first night as husband and wife wrapped in each other's arms, whispering promises and dreams into the darkness. The winter was hard, as winters in Colorado always were, but Theresa had never been happier. She continued to work in the main house, helping Alina, but now she also had her own home to care for. She cooked for Cole, mended his clothes, kept the cabin warm and welcoming. He worked long days on the ranch, but he always came home to her, and that was all that mattered. They talked about the future, about maybe saving enough money to buy their own piece of land someday, about the children they wanted to have. Cole taught her to ride better, and she taught him to make bread. They read together in the evenings by lamplight, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. In the spring, Theresa realized she was expecting a child. She told Cole one evening after supper, watching his face carefully. His eyes widened, and then he broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and then set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Yes, in the fall, I think." He dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach, his arms wrapped around her waist. "I am going to be a father. I cannot believe it." She ran her fingers through his hair, her heart overflowing. "You are going to be a wonderful father." The months that followed were full of anticipation and preparation. Alina was thrilled and helped Theresa sew baby clothes and prepare the cabin. Cole built a cradle with his own hands, carving it carefully and sanding it smooth. He was nervous and excited in equal measure, constantly asking Theresa how she felt and if there was anything she needed. In late September, on a cool night when the first hints of autumn were in the air, Theresa went into labor. Alina and a midwife from town attended her, and Cole paced outside the cabin, nearly wearing a hole in the ground. It was a long, difficult labor, and there were moments when Theresa thought she could not go on. But Alina held her hand and whispered encouragement, and she found strength she did not know she had. Just before dawn, their son was born. He came into the world squalling, red-faced and healthy, and when the midwife placed him in Theresa's arms, she wept with joy and exhaustion. Cole came into the cabin, his face pale and anxious, and when he saw his son, he froze. "He is perfect," Theresa said, her voice hoarse. "Come meet your son." Cole approached slowly, as if afraid he might break the spell. He looked down at the tiny, wrinkled baby, and tears began to stream down his face. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered. "Just like his mother. What should we name him?" Theresa had been thinking about this. "I would like to name him James, after my father, James Osborne." Cole nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he leaned down and kissed her forehead. "James it is. Thank you, Theresa. Thank you for him, for this, for everything." Little James was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and both Cole and Theresa were utterly smitten. Cole was an attentive, loving father, getting up in the night to help with feedings, rocking the baby to sleep, singing to him in a soft, low voice. Life settled into a new rhythm. Theresa divided her time between caring for James and helping Alina when she could. Cole continued to work on the ranch, but he spent every spare moment with his family. Raphael was so pleased with Cole's work and dedication that he gave him a raise and began talking about making him a partner in the ranch someday. The years passed, and they were good years. James grew into a bright, curious toddler. When he was 2, Theresa became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter they named Ruth, after Cole's mother. Ruth was a quieter baby than James had been, with her father's serious gray-green eyes and a thoughtful disposition. The little cabin became too small, so Raphael helped Cole build a proper 2-room house with a loft for the children. Theresa planted a garden, and Cole built a chicken coop. Their home was modest, but it was full of love and laughter. One evening, when James was 5 and Ruth was 3, Theresa and Cole sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting everything in golden light, and Theresa felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "You ever think about that day we met?" she asked Cole, leaning against his shoulder. "All the time," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "I think about you standing on that dusty road with your carpetbag, looking lost and scared and determined all at once. I think about how close I came to just riding past, because I was in a hurry to get back to the ranch, but something made me stop. I am glad you did," she said softly. "I do not know where I would be if you had not." "I know exactly where you would be," he said, his voice firm. "You would have made it to the ranch on your own, and you would have gotten the job, and you would have been fine. You are the strongest person I know, Theresa. You always have been." She shook her head. "I was not strong that day. I was broken." "No," he said, turning to look at her. "You were bending, but you did not break. There is a difference. You kept going even when you wanted to give up. That is strength." She thought about that for a moment, about the girl she had been 6 years ago, grieving and alone and terrified. She had felt weak then, but maybe Cole was right. Maybe strength was not about never falling down. Maybe it was about getting back up, about accepting help when you needed it and offering help when you could. "You made me stronger," she said. "You believed in me when I did not believe in myself." "We made each other stronger," he corrected. "That is what love does." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and Theresa felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She had lost so much, but she had gained so much more. A husband who loved her, children who filled her days with joy, a home and a community and a future. The years continued to unfold. James started school in town, riding in with Raphael when he went for supplies. Ruth followed 2 years later. Cole became a full partner in the ranch, and their financial situation improved steadily. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable, and that was more than enough. When James was 10 and Ruth was 8, Theresa gave birth to another son, whom they named William after no one in particular, just because they liked the name. William was a boisterous, happy baby who grew into a boisterous, happy child, keeping them all on their toes. Raphael and Alina's children grew up as well. Miguel took over more responsibilities on the ranch, learning from his father and from Cole. Sophia married a young man from town and moved to Denver, and Anna became a schoolteacher in Fort Collins. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters, dry summers, sick animals, and lean years. Cole broke his arm in a bad fall from a horse and had to take months to recover. Theresa's health was fragile after William's birth, and for a while, Cole was terrified he might lose her. But they weathered every storm together, leaning on each other, on their community, on the love that had only grown deeper and stronger over the years. One autumn evening, when they had been married nearly 15 years, Theresa and Cole took a ride up to the meadow where he had first told her he loved her. The children were old enough now to be left with a neighbor for a few hours, and they needed the time alone. The meadow was as beautiful as ever, though the flowers were mostly gone now, replaced by golden grasses and the deep blue of fall asters. They sat on the same fallen log, and Theresa rested her head on Cole's shoulder. "You remember what I said to you that day in the barn?" she asked. "When you were taking care of that horse, which thing, I said I was not strong enough, and you told me to lean on you until I was." "I remember," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I did lean on you," she said, "for a long time. But somewhere along the way I realized I was not leaning anymore. I was standing on my own 2 feet, and you were right there beside me. We were holding each other up." "That is how it is supposed to work," he said. "Marriage, partnership, love. It is not about one person being strong and the other being weak. It is about being strong together." She lifted her head to look at him. His face was more lined now, weathered by years of sun and wind and hard work, but to her, he was as handsome as he had been the day they met. His eyes still held that same kindness, that same strength. "I love you, Cole Osborne," she said, "more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." "I love you too, Theresa Osborne," he said, "more than words can say. You are my everything. My partner, my love, my home." He kissed her, and it was sweet and deep and full of all the years they had shared and all the years still to come. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, talking and laughing and remembering. Then they rode back down to the ranch, to their children and their home and the life they had built together. The years continued to pass. James grew into a fine young man, serious and responsible like his father. He fell in love with a girl from Fort Collins and married her when he was 22. They settled on a piece of land adjacent to the ranch, and Cole helped James build a house and start his own small herd. Ruth turned out to have her grandmother Alina's gift for healing. She studied with the doctor in town and became a nurse, dedicating her life to helping others. She married a kind, quiet man who worked at the bank, and they had 3 children of their own. William, the youngest, was the adventurous one. He joined the cavalry for a few years, seeing parts of the country his parents could only imagine. But eventually, he came home, realizing that the ranch and the mountains and the wide Colorado sky were in his blood. He took over more of the ranch work, allowing Cole to slow down a bit as he aged. Raphael and Alina both lived into their 70s, and when Raphael passed away peacefully in his sleep, it was Cole who stepped up to keep the ranch running. Alina moved into the main house with Miguel and his family, and she spent her final years surrounded by children and grandchildren, content and loved. Cole and Theresa grew old together. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined, their bodies slower, but their love never dimmed. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other good morning and good night, still sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the sun set over the mountains. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a big party. The barn was decorated just as it had been for their wedding, and there was food and music and dancing. Cole, despite his aching joints, insisted on dancing with Theresa. They swayed together slowly, oblivious to everyone around them. 40 years, Theresa marveled. Where did the time go? I do not know, Cole said, but I would not change a single day of it. Not even the hard times, not even those. They made us who we are. She laid her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I am so grateful for you, Cole, for that day you stopped on the road. For everything that came after. I am the grateful one, he said. You gave me a life I never thought I could have. A family, a home, love. You gave me everything. They danced until the song ended, and then their grandchildren pulled them into the circle for a lively reel. Theresa laughed until her sides hurt, and Cole's eyes sparkled with joy. That night, as they lay in bed in the house Cole had built with his own hands so many years ago, Theresa turned to her husband. Cole, I need to tell you something. What is it, love? I am strong now. I have been for a long time, but I still want to lean on you, not because I need to, but because I choose to. Because being with you, sharing this life with you, makes everything better. He pulled her close, and she felt his chest rumble with a quiet laugh. Then lean on me for as long as you want. I will always be here. Promise. Promise. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had on their wedding night 4 decades earlier. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. It was a spring morning, and Theresa woke to find him still beside her, his face relaxed and peaceful. She held his hand and whispered her love to him one last time, and then she called for their children. The grief was profound, a pain unlike anything Theresa had felt since her father's death all those years ago. But this time, she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her, holding her up, reminding her that Cole's love lived on in all of them. They buried him in the small cemetery outside Fort Collins, not far from where her parents were laid to rest. Theresa stood by his grave and thanked him for 44 years of love, for teaching her that strength came in many forms, for being her partner and her home. Theresa lived for another 5 years after Cole's death. She stayed in the house they had built, surrounded by memories and love. Her children visited often, bringing their children and grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had stopped on a dusty road to help a desperate young woman, about the love that had grown from that simple act of kindness. On a warm summer evening, as the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of gold and red, Theresa sat on her porch and felt at peace. She thought about her life, about all the joy and sorrow and love it had held. She thought about her parents, about the fear and desperation of that long-ago day when she had lost everything. She had whispered that she was not strong enough, and Cole had told her to lean on him until she was. And she had. She had leaned on him and he had leaned on her, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. As the last light faded from the sky, Theresa closed her eyes and smiled. She was ready. Ready to rest, ready to see Cole again, ready to let her long, well-lived life come to a close. She passed quietly in her sleep that night, and her children found her in the morning, still smiling. They buried her next to Cole, and on the shared headstone, they inscribed a simple message that captured the essence of their love. Together in life, together in eternity. The ranch continued on, passing down through the generations. James's son took it over, and then his son after that. The little cabin where Cole and Theresa had first lived as newlyweds was preserved as a family memorial, and every new generation learned the story of the cowboy and the young woman he had helped, the love that had grown between them, and the strength they had found in each other. The meadow full of wildflowers became a sacred place for the family. Couples would ride up there to propose or to renew their vows. Parents brought their children to teach them about perseverance and love, and the importance of helping others when they needed it most. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the mountains glowed in the fading light, people swore they could feel the presence of Cole and Theresa, still together, still watching over the land and the family they had created. Their story became a legend in Fort Collins, passed down through the generations. The tale of a young woman who had lost everything and a cowboy who had stopped to help her, and how that single act of kindness had blossomed into a love that transcended time and death. Children grew up hearing about how Theresa had whispered that she was not strong enough, and Cole had said to lean on him until she was. It became a touchstone for the community, a reminder that strength was not about standing alone but about knowing when to reach out and when to offer support. The house that Cole had built stood for over 100 years, a testament to his skill and dedication. It weathered storms and droughts, harsh winters and scorching summers, just as the love between Cole and Theresa had weathered every challenge life had thrown at them. In the end, their story was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, though there had been plenty of both. It was about two people who had found each other when they needed each other most, who had chosen to face life together, who had built something lasting and true out of love and dedication, and the simple willingness to lean on each other when times were hard. It was a story of the Wild West, of a time when life was harsh and uncertain, when survival required strength and courage and the support of those around you. But more than that, it was a story of love, the kind of love that endures beyond death, that shapes generations, that proves that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help and accept it when it is offered. And so the legacy of Cole and Theresa Osborne lived on, not just in the ranch and the family they had created, but in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and was reminded that love, real love, was about being strong enough to lean on each other, to lift each other up, to face whatever came together. The mountains still stood tall over Fort Collins, the same mountains that had witnessed their first meeting, their courtship, their wedding, their life together. And as the sun set behind those peaks each evening, casting the world in shades of gold and purple and deep blue, it seemed fitting that the beauty and permanence of that landscape should mirror the love story that had unfolded beneath it, a love that had started with a simple offer of help and had grown into something that would never truly end.